It's also looking dry but cloudy around northeastern England. Here it will stay dry through much of the afternoon, though the cloud may be thick enough for a few spots of rain. There may be the odd spot of rain around eastern parts of Scotland. Meanwhile, further west it's looking wetter, although the rain will not be especially heavy. The earlier rain will have cleared from Northern Ireland, so it'll be mostly dry here, and the clouds should break up, meaning some sunny breaks are expected this afternoon. So the rain in the west will edge a little further eastwards this afternoon, and it will be drier and brighter following on from that. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of your Monday.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the New Look Bev Turner Today on GB News, TV, radio and online. All the stories that matter to you with honest debate and plenty of opinion. As we speak, Suella Braverman is in Paris to sign a new deal which should end the migrant crossings. Do you think it will? Let me know. We've got a Twitter poll running on that at GB News, so get online and vote. Did you see the pictures of Albanian demonstrators blocking Westminster Bridge at the weekend because we aren't being hospitable enough? We're going to be discussing all of that as well. This week's budget, NHS strife and Trump licking Republican wounds after last weekend's midterms. They're all going to be covered by the Newshound guests who are going to be joining me for a coffee on the sofa this morning. That's all coming up after a look at the latest news.
A very good morning. 3 minutes past 10. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The UK and France have signed a historic agreement to tackle the migrant crisis. Now, just a quick warning, this story contains flashing images. So the deal, British staff will be working in French border control rooms for the first time, and the number of officers patrolling beaches is going to be boosted by 40%. The new deal is designed to stop people crossing the Channel illegally. Over 41,000 asylum seekers have made the journey so far this year. Other measures include an investment in CCTV and dog detection teams, as well as plans to better equip officers with drones and night vision. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the deal, that's worth up to £63 million to France, will benefit both countries.
We take a multi-dimensional approach. There's no single answer, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. Our cooperation and collaboration with the French on the Channel, on the UK coastline, on the French coastline, is absolutely integral to ensuring that there is a robust barrier preventing people disembarking from the French beaches in the first place.
GB News has learnt that 10 people tried to escape authorities in Kent this morning after arriving on a small boat. They ran away after their dinghy landed on St Margaret's Bay between Dover and Deal at around 8 o'clock. Well, GB News understands so far 3 people have now been detained. Police and border officials are still searching the area for those who managed to get away. The Prime Minister says Thursday's autumn budget will put the country's public finances on a sustainable trajectory. Rishi Sunak's working to reassure and convince the markets that the government has a sound plan to fix the economy. The Chancellor's warned that everyone will need to pay a bit more tax and said sacrifices are needed to balance the books. The Foreign Secretary James Cleverly told GB News the upcoming autumn budget would protect the most vulnerable.
We will always support the people who are struggling, but we also have to make sure that we balance the books. And the decisions that the Prime Minister and Chancellor have already taken has increased confidence in the markets. It has reduced the cost of borrowing from the high point that we saw earlier on in the autumn. These things are positive steps, but we do still have tough decisions to make and real hard work to do.
A workers' trade union is warning the Prime Minister that the autumn statement is his last chance to save the NHS. Unite is calling for Rishi Sunak to use this week's budget to fix underfunding across the health service and also to avoid industrial action. They say the health service is on the brink of collapse. The Prime Minister will call on world leaders to cooperate to fix global economic instabilities at the G20 summit this week. Rishi Sunak arrived in Indonesia last night for the conference in Bali tomorrow. He'll appeal to fellow leaders to offer government support to the most vulnerable. Mr Sunak will promote a 5-point plan, including urging allies to transition away from dependency on Russian energy. Well, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was reportedly taken to hospital with a heart condition after arriving for the G20 summit. He has since denied the claim, but Bali's governor says he did attend for check-up and he left in good health. Russia's war in Ukraine is going to dominate talks at the conference. Ukraine's president has addressed his troops in the city of Kherson just days after Russian forces were forced to withdraw after months of occupation. Scientists in the UK have launched a trial screening programme for type 1 diabetes, which they say could transform the way it's identified. Around 20,000 children aged between 3 and 13 are being invited to take part in a study at Birmingham University. The aim is to assess the risk of developing the condition at the earliest age possible for a quick and safe diagnosis. The King turns 74 today. It's his first birthday as monarch. Gun salutes are going to be fired across London in honour of his birthday. The Household Cavalry Band will play Happy Birthday during the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. He's expected to celebrate his birthday privately. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, over to Bev.
A very good morning. Thank you for joining me. You are watching Bev Turner today on GB News, on radio, on TV and online. In just a moment, we're going to be talking about the Albanian demonstrators who blocked Westminster Bridge and brought parts of London to a standstill over the Remembrance weekend. So let's talk about their grievances and whether they were justified. Let me know what you think. And yes, it is a funny time of the year, but the Football World Cup starts this Sunday in Qatar. The hosts have come under fire for their human rights records and medieval views on homosexuality. Sports journalist Harry Harris is going to be here to talk about the corruption scandals surrounding FIFA. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, is priming us for a devastating autumn statement. He said that everyone must be prepared to pay more taxes. How is that logical as we head into a recession? Let's find out this morning. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. So please do email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews to give your opinion on anything that we're discussing. So let's kick off talking about those images of Albanian people over the weekend bringing London to a standstill in the shadow of Big Ben, draping their national flag over the Winston Churchill statue. They are furious at being included in the word invaders used by the Home Secretary to describe illegal immigrants and arguing that we Brits should be more welcoming. Now, I'm not pitching for a job at the Albanian migrant PR department, but guys, it is one thing to turn up at someone's house uninvited. It is another thing entirely to then express your shock that they haven't cooked you a three-course meal and decanted the wine. Although, actually, we are offering 3 meals a day and quality accommodation in 200 hotels to the 40,000 people who have arrived in Britain on perilous boats this year, 12,000 of which are indeed Albanian. A poor country run by a socialist government, perhaps, but not a dangerous war zone. Their mass exodus, nearly 40% of Albanians have fled since 1991, was worsened by the pandemic effect on employment and savings. The World Bank estimates that 30% of the remaining population there will soon be living in poverty. But this is the tip of the iceberg. According to a recent survey, 83% of Albanians want to leave. So-called ghost towns are being created across the long, thin country with its 280 miles of coastline. Albanians are sick of food and fuel prices rising, with the government doing nothing to grow their economy. They're not the only ones. We need to be able to discuss this issue freely without accusations of racism or xenophobia, because right now, nobody is winning. You can't blame anyone for wanting a crime-free life in which they try to better themselves. But Albanian men wishing to vanish into a leaky British system to work cash in hand, or worse, get involved in sophisticated crime syndicates are not the same as Afghani mothers and children left at the mercy of a Taliban regime which stones women to death. As we speak, Home Secretary Suella Braverman is in Paris after signing a deal that increased the amount we pay to police the border to £62 million a year. She claims this will help by stationing British border officers in France and breaking up the people smuggling gangs via an increased use of drones. Well, unless the drones carry darts to burst the boats before they launch, surely they are not the answer. We're living in an era that views technology as the solution to everything. Let's wait and see if a digital identification system is rolled out as a solution to this, which catches us all in its net. Instead, as a matter of urgency, the EU must further the proposal to bring Albania, a country with spectacular natural landscape, into its membership. With investment and pressure to eradicate corruption, maybe there's no reason why the exodus couldn't be reversed. Let's see if Suella Braverman can live up to her name and finally fix this mess. Let me know what you think. We've got a Twitter poll running on this as well at the moment to let us know your thoughts and to discuss what happened over the weekend. I'm going to be asking, are we demonising Albanians and whether they are justified in taking their actions on Saturday? I'm joined now by broadcaster and political commentator Matthew Stadlen and Stephen Wolfe, the director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Matt, good morning. Let me start with you. Were the Albanians right to do this on Saturday, do you think?
Absolutely. I was invited by one of my Albanian British friends, Kajesi, to go on this demonstration, and I would have done, but he only invited me at the last minute, and I was busy looking after my 7-week-old son, so I couldn't go. But you said that they brought London to a standstill. They didn't bring London to a standstill. It was a protest on Westminster Bridge, which was organised in cahoots with the police. So with the full permission of the police, it was a 2-hour protest. At the end of those 2 hours, people started leaving. There was no violence, no nastiness. One thing that was perhaps a little bit unhelpful was putting an Albanian flag over a statue of Winston Churchill. Now, I've talked to my friend about that. He said that was a sign of respect. It absolutely was not an insult. But of course, the Daily Mail runs with that, Albanians insulting Winston Churchill. Yes, perhaps unhelpful, but certainly not what it's made out to be. Albania, as you say, is a beautiful country. I've been to Albania, Bev. So my friend and builder, Jesse, who helped me with a lot of stuff around my house with his team, incredibly hardworking. By the way, sent a picture of himself in his office yesterday at 10 p.m. on a Sunday. He's got 3 kids. He's so hardworking. We went to Albania together. We did a road trip. I got to know the country. It is a beautiful country. Yes, we want to discourage people from leaving. Yes, we want to help Albania cut out corruption in that country. But the Albanians who are here, the overwhelming majority of Albanians in this country, many of whom have got British citizenship, are incredibly hardworking. And to demonise them, it's the same old story. It's racism. It's nasty. It's what Trump did to Mexicans when he said they're sending their worst. They're not sending their worst. Yes, we have to have safe borders. Yes, the government has got to get a grip. But instead of saying we're being invaded by rubber dinghies, which is absolutely pathetic, instead of scapegoating Albanians, Braverman and Sunak should be doing what they now are doing, thank goodness, and that's dealing constructively with the French to find solutions. When Liz Truss questioned whether Macron was a friend or a foe, how do you think that helps get a grip of the migration crisis?
Well, Matt, just to be clear, I didn't say that it brought... Look, just to be clear, I didn't say it brought the whole of London to a standstill. I said it brought parts of London to a standstill. And as I said in my opening, I think the optics of this, in terms of if you want to get people on side with hardworking Albanians that want to come here, it looked terrible at the weekend, given the numbers that we're seeing being put up in hotels in the UK, given that we're spending £6.8 million a day to house illegal refugees. Stephen Wolfe, from the director at the Centre for Migration, what Matthew is arguing is that hard-working Albanians that want to come over here should not be lumped in with all people who want to come here and cause crime. Is he right?
Well, I don't think anybody who comes and works in any country in the world would feel particularly happy if they were lumped in with criminals and gangsters and people traffickers. I'm working here in the US at the moment, monitoring immigration into the US as well. I wouldn't like to be called an Englishman in a nasty way, nor would anyone who's Polish working in the UK either. But the fact of the matter is, no one is actually calling all Albanians criminals or giving them any racist comments. What they are doing is being very specific. They're saying the Albanians coming over in the channel, in the boats, are being connected to the criminal gangs. 12,000 have arrived. Many of them are being linked to those criminal gangs. The Albanians in the criminal gangs in the UK have taken over control of the marijuana industry from the Thai. We know that because that's internationally recognised by international crime organisations fighting it. We also know that the Albanian gangs have started to take over the cocaine market, particularly in London, so much that the Yardies are even frightened of them. We know that the people trafficking and smuggling into the sex gangs are now being controlled by the Albanians. Does Matthew have any solutions to that? Or does he say that it doesn't exist, it's not a big problem, and the police internationally in France are lying?
Matt,
that is the point. So ordinary citizens are being brought into them.
Hang on, Stephen, let Matt come in. Go on, Matt.
You had a long time there, and I'm going to deal with this. Because I'm sick to death of people making comments about us saying that we're racist, when all we're actually doing is raising the issue that there are criminal gangs, criminal aspects about this, and you simply seem to overlook it and ignore it.
Go on, Matt.
But very, very clear. First of all, Stephen says there's lots of evidence that 12,000 Albanians who have come to this country are connected to gangs. I'd like to know what his research is. That's the first point. Second point
the National Crime Agency have said that. The National Crime Agency have said this is a problem.
Secondly, there certainly are some Albanian criminals. There are plenty of criminals from every different country, and not least of all our own country. We've got 85% of paedophiles in this country look like us, look like Stephen and me, white men. So we really must not fall into the trap of letting the government off the hook by scapegoating Albanians. The Tories have been in power for 12 years. This so-called crisis, and by the way, it's partly seen as a crisis because it's so visible. People were coming over in lorries before, we didn't see it because they were stowing away in lorries. So the numbers may not have changed, it's the visibility. But we have to not let this government off the hook. What they need to do is take practical solutions. I absolutely support strong borders in this country. I think we should be generous to refugees. My grandparents were Jewish refugees. I wouldn't be alive if this country hadn't been generous. We have to be generous, but we have to, Bev, we have to, of course, clamp down on illegal migration. And when we have crime in the UK, the police have to do their jobs. Above all, the government has to do its job.
But Matt, the Albanians who are arriving here on the small boats don't have a reason to be here as refugees. They're coming from a safe country. It might be poor, but they're at no personal danger there, so they just do not qualify under that particular definition.
Well, first of all, only people who do qualify, I'll be absolutely clear about this, only people, hear what I say, only people who qualify for asylum in this country should be given asylum. We have to be absolutely crystal clear. The fact is that a lot of Albanians who have been processed, and remember the government system is years behind. The government is in a complete mess. They're not processing claims quickly enough, which is partly why we've got these terrible conditions in asylum centres in Kent. But those who should not be here, shouldn't be here, and they should be deported. Absolutely, they should be deported. But those who have a right to stay should be allowed to stay. And those who have been processed, Bev, and this is really important, everyone watching knows, a very high percentage of those who have actually had their asylum cases processed have been, by our state, by the British state, granted asylum. And that says a lot.
Absolutely, and I don't think anyone would argue with that. If you're going to go through the correct channels and have right to remain here and work and contribute to our tax system, then A-OK. We're all happy with that, Stephen, aren't we? But isn't the problem that 12,000 Albanians have not chosen to take that route? And I'm sure there's a lot that we actually agree on. We all agree the government should be doing more to make this system work. We should be tightening up our borders. Let's see if the news today changes that. But Stephen, last word to you.
Well, I would say that in terms of Albania, there was roughly around the same numbers who came last year. Matthew is right that the people came over. In terms of the lorries, they're still doing that this year. There probably will be around 10,000 on the lorries this year. The fact of the matter is that the numbers who are claiming asylum have increased. It used to be an average of 32,500. We're now looking at 47,500 a year. So the fact that what we're looking at is an increase in people using economic reasons for leaving their nations to come into the UK. And whereas those people who have genuine asylum claims, which are being dealt with, they're the ones who are suffering as a consequence of that. The 12,000 people leaving Albania, if those numbers are going to be absolutely accurate, will be ones who are leaving for economic reasons. And the process system that we have doesn't deport them very quickly. And as a consequence of that, the numbers get more complicated in the UK too.
Guys, I'm sure we'll talk about it again soon. Great debate. Thank you both for joining me. As we say, we do need to be talking about this without accusations of racism and xenophobia, because that's in everybody's interest. Matt Stadlen, broadcaster and political commentator, and Stephen Wolfe, the director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity there. Thank you both. Now, after 11, we're going to be carrying on this a little bit. I'm going to be joined by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White to discuss the new deal between France and the UK. Now, there is still plenty more to come after the break. I'm going to move over to the sofa. I'm going to get a fresh cup of coffee and I'm going to go over there and I'm going to introduce you to my panel this morning who have been patiently waiting, and they're going to talk us through some of their favourite stories that have broken in the news today. And also, send us an email, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell us what you think. Tweet at GBNews. We've got a poll going there right now asking, do you believe that the UK's new £65 million deal with France will fix the influx of illegal migration? Cast your vote now. Time to go and grab that coffee. I'll see you in 2.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Good morning. It is 10:24. You're watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, let me introduce you to my panel this morning. I'm pleased to be joined by former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Yeah. Always got a naughty glint in his eye. I have to keep an eye on him as soon as he's in the building. And the author and charity founder, MBE. You got an MBE, Nick Buckley.
Yes.
Did you get your MBE for your charity work?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. OK, you've got some stories that have caught your eyes this morning, haven't you? We're going to talk about them. Now, Nick, you found a piece in the Mail written by Dominic Lawson. This is about the eco-zealots. What's Dominic saying?
So Dominic is basically saying, instead of getting them on the news channels and talking to them about their tactics, why are you throwing Heinz soup on a Rembrandt? Why are you climbing up the gantry at the M25 and causing this and making a man miss his dad's funeral? Instead of just discussing that, why aren't we challenging them on the lunacy that they're spouting, such as 8 million people are going to die? And you heard the founder from Extinction Rebellion the other day saying, your girlfriend and your mum are going to be raped because of climate change. Why aren't professional journalists going, that's rubbish?
Yeah, well, obviously I would suggest that Dominic Lawson needs to watch a bit more GB News, because I think we have done a pretty good job, actually, of calling them out. Sorry, go on, Stephen.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's two levels here. One is the absolute absurdity. I don't think there's ever been a group of people with a better cause so badly presented. And when you've got people like Indigo Rumbelow and Phoebe Plummer, I mean, are they real people? I mean, these are almost, like sort of straw men put up that. But look, the real problem is the government can react to things, as it did when it took lead out of petrol, it brought the Clean Air Act. It can do things. What's happening at the present time is that they're losing the argument, they're losing the case. And you're really seeing more and more cases. Do you remember the ones where they dragged their protesters off the train, off the roof of the train, and they'll be doing more and more of that. So I think everybody agrees that there's an issue with climate change. What nobody agrees with, that I'm aware of, apart from a few sort of self-obsessed, narcissistic, self-publicist, virtue signalers, is that gluing yourself to a gantry on the M25 is going to do any good at all, apart from your Instagram profile.
It's the arrogance of it as well, isn't it, Nick? That's what amazes me. I was interviewing somebody last week who was a PhD student who'd taken a year out of his studies. He was zooming in to the show from his student accommodation. Again, it was a Farquhar or a Sebastian or a Tristan. I can't remember. He had a double-barrel surname. Anyway, I know that. So I think what we're getting at when we talk about the class issue, they've got the time and the money, right? They're not working.
It's a gap year, isn't it?
It's a gap year, isn't it? Yes, darling. And they're not working hard in the pub at night so they can pay their student rent. Yeah. They're being bankrolled by mummy and daddy. So what is it then, Nick? Is it more about... when I was talking to them, it's about them. It's their issue.
It's pure and simple. It's narcissism. It's, look at me, I'm amazing. I'm just like Gandhi. I'm just like Mandela. This is what they would be fighting if they were alive today. I'm just like Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm saving the world. And if you believe you're saving the world, that must feel great. It also then gives you an excuse to do whatever you want because you're saving the world.
It's Greta Thunberg envy, really. But the awful thing is that why don't they get involved in politics? We're a democracy in this country. I mean, we may disagree about the level of it, but everybody can get involved in politics, not necessarily as an MP or as a councillor, but your MPs and your councillors are available to you. Change the government to change the law to make things better. Now, I understand the argument about China and coal and everything like that, but you've got to actually act locally and think globally, and we can do something, but hanging off the M25 ain't the way to do it.
But that's hard work. Turning up at
silly me.
council meetings twice a week, crawling up that political ladder, much easier to, like you say, scale a gantry and put a video on Instagram, and then you're suddenly on TV stations.
A wet Tuesday night in the church hall at the MP surgery, you make a persuasive case for gantry hanging.
But I mean, look, like you say, maybe they have a point. Maybe there is a climate condition, a situation we have to deal with. I don't think it necessarily qualifies as an emergency.
I don't think there is.
You don't think there is?
I don't think there is.
I think the science is still up for debate. And I guess that's what Dominic Lawson's point is. In these interviews, these interviewees, what they are saying is being accepted as fact. And I feel like we haven't had that discussion.
They're saying it as if it is fact. They're saying, have you read the ICCP report, whatever it is? Because, and then they come out with a load of rubbish, and because no one else has read that report, it's like, oh, that must be true.
Yeah.
But it's not in those reports. It's just made up hysteria.
Well, they've got us talking and generally talking about the fact that they're a bunch of idiots.
But
so
it's a hell of if there is no climate change,
talking
it's a hell
of
of a
idiots,
coincidence.
Stephen, I just want to move on. I know you wanted to discuss with us this morning Matt Hancock in I'm a Celebrity. Was this your idea? I said you always bring me problems when you come into this building. Look, it does raise a serious issue, doesn't it, about whether MPs should be allowed to do this kind of thing?
Well, I mean, years and years ago, there used to be a programme called At the Sharp End. And the idea is it took MPs, honest, decent, hard-working, civilised MPs, and put them in an environment in which they were not familiar, and just to see how they reacted. And they were filming us. And I was sent to Dartmoor Prison.
And you were doing that?
Oh, yeah. I spent a fortnight in Dartmore Prison.
Wow.
With a guy called Gerald Howarth. And you know, we were prison officers, not prisoners.
Yeah.
But what I found very, very quickly was that you tended to act up for it. You tended to ham up for it. When the chief prison officer practiced what's called evasion technique, in case you got taken hostage, he broke 2 of my ribs. And then when I got back to Parliament, I went across to St Thomas's Hospital and I said, excuse me, I think I've got some broken ribs. And they said, yep, you have. How did you get it? I said, well, I was in Dartmoor. I said, do they know you're out? I said, no, it's all right, I'm an MP. And I could see in the mirror, psychiatric registrar to A&E now. But the thing was, you act up for it. With Matt Hancock, I think Matt Hancock, as he said, he wants to put hay in the loft. He's going to get $500,000 for this.
He wants forgiveness.
Yeah.
That was the interesting thing for me, Nick, was that he said he wants forgiveness from the nation. It's not going to come that easily, is it?
First of all, I've not watched it. I don't watch it, never have watched it, never will watch it. It's just rubbish TV. But I have read about it. Should we stop politicians doing what they want to do? No, we shouldn't. He's a politician. If he wants to go on to that, he can go on to that. Then gives us the right to look at him and look at his character and go, he is not the sort of politician we want. I think he's just trying to rebuild his career because he's hated quite heavily throughout the country because of the lockdown and then what happened there. And is he looking for forgiveness or is he looking for a new career pathway? Or is he looking for a big payday because he knows it's all over for him?
I think all of the above.
Yeah.
I think all of the above. And, you know, I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, Stephen? Because, as we say, we don't want to put too many restrictions on what politicians can do. To some extent, we want politicians to be existing in the real world. We want them to have a good backstory of possibly working in different environments and dealing with different people, and so that they bring that wealth of experience to their job. We don't want necessarily career politicians who come straight out of Oxford and Cambridge at 21 and go to Westminster.
I entirely agree, but I mean, I'm not entirely sure that the real world consists of people eating a kangaroo's private parts in the middle of the jungle.
Not often enough, one might say.
Yeah.
But
But maybe in that case, when you are elected as a politician, maybe you should be paid more so that you aren't tempted to go and top up the divorce coffers via this means.
I have to say, offering politicians money so that they don't have to earn more money is a no. It's not going to happen. It simply isn't going to happen. But I think what we need, maybe look at term limits for MPs, so that maybe you don't take the job forever.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, I got into Parliament when I was 49 years old. I did 22 years in that. But, you know, I'd been a hospital porter, I'd been a bus driver, I'd done things beforehand. And I'm not saying that's brilliant, but compared to nowadays, where you tend to go to Oxford or Cambridge, and then you go to America, whatever, come in, it's nonsense. But the question is, and I think following up from what Nick said, what does Matt Hancock want? I think he's not going to be an MP at the next election. He's going to get deselected in something.
Yeah.
He's got a huge amount of money he's got young children, don't forget. You know, and the Gina Colodangelo business is going to, you know, obviously there's a divorce, he'll have to pay for that. So he's going to lose a lot of that 400,000. So
you know what he likes?
Where does he go?
When you watch the programme, and I've watched bits of it, but obviously I watch Dan Wootton at 9 o'clock during the week. I don't watch that.
Don't we all?
But I've watched bits of it on Fast Forward because I have to talk about it on the telly. Do you know what he wants? He wants to be liked. That's the most chilling thing. He wants to be liked. Being liked by the campmates is so important to him. And I think it tells you a lot about maybe where his Achilles heel lies.
Because he's a professional politician.
Because he's a professional politician.
It hasn't worked with Mike Tindall, has it?
Thanks, guys. You're going to be back in just a moment. But after the break, it is 6 days before the World Cup kicks off. What? It's not summer. I know it's a bit of a weird time of the year. So to preview the tournament and go through the home nation's chances, I'm going to be joined by sports journalist Harry Harris. That's after your morning news with Rosie.
A very good morning. It's 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The UK and France have signed a historic agreement to tackle the migrant crisis. Now, a warning, the video we're going to show you does have some flashing images. So British staff will be working in French border control rooms for the first time, and the number of officers patrolling beaches will be boosted by 40%. The new deal's designed to stop people crossing the Channel illegally. Over 40,000 asylum seekers have done so far this year. Other measures include an investment in CCTV and dog detection teams, as well as better plans to equip officers with drones and night vision. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the deal, which is worth up to £63 million to France, will benefit both countries.
We take a multi-dimensional approach. There's no single answer, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. Our cooperation and collaboration with the French on the Channel, on the UK coastline, on the French coastline, is absolutely integral to ensuring that there is a robust barrier preventing people disembarking from the French beaches in the first place.
The Prime Minister says Thursday's autumn budget will put the country's public finances on a sustainable trajectory. Rishi Sunak's working to reassure and convince the markets that the government has a sound plan to fix the economy. The Chancellor has warned that everyone will need to pay a bit more tax and said sacrifices are needed to balance the books. The King is 74 today. It's his first birthday as monarch. Gun salutes will be fired across London in honour of the event, and the Household Cavalry Band will play Happy Birthday during the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1797 and €1.1444. The price of gold is at £1,490 and 8 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,345 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip
of the iceberg. And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, you are with Bev Turner today on GB News. You've been sending in your views. Thank you very much. Julian has said, if Albanians are reasonably escaping a socialist government, can I flee to the USA to escape Hunt and Sunak? Margie has said, I've just seen a mob of Albanians protesting that they demand their rights, but their rights are what? This is, of course, what we were talking about at the top of the hour. I'm going to be speaking to Mark White as well down the line. He's at one of the hotels, I believe, where some of the migrants are being housed. We're going to find out what's going on from him. We've got a Twitter poll going as well. Please get involved with that and let me know whether you think what Suella Braverman has announced this morning is going to make any sort of difference. Kay has said, I'm very annoyed by these Albanians. Why don't they demonstrate in their country? Funnily enough, Kay, they were as well this weekend. The streets were packed in Albania. They were demonstrating against their own government. If they don't like our own country's corruption, they should demonstrate there. They should bring down their own country's system. They are trying, Kay, I promise you. And Marcus said, whilst illegal immigration is important, 40,000 is a drop in the ocean compared to the 1.2 immigration visas, and is all a smokescreen to turn you away from our government slowly rejoining the EU. Keep your messages coming in, won't you? Now, it is a strange time of the year, but the Football World Cup kicks off on Sunday in Qatar. Now, if, like me, you enjoy getting in on these big events without being a committed football fan, I've got the perfect man to give us an idiot's guide. Joining me to discuss this now is sports journalist Harry Harris. Hello, Harry. How are you?
Hello, Bev. How are you doing? I'm fine.
Very good. Very good. So, are you excited about Qatar? Just first of all, explain to us, why is it happening in November?
No one knows. The reason is, of course, that FIFA, in their wisdom, after a great deal of corruption and a few backhanders, decided to place the World Cup in Qatar. And even now, Sepp Blatter's suggested it was a big mistake. Well, of course, it was his big mistake. And big bucks was the reason behind it. Of course, playing the World Cup at this time of year is complete nonsense. Yes, of course, we're all going to be glued to the TV watching the matches, but you know, this isn't a proper World Cup. And in fact, you've got so many players. Really, it's obscene to put players through this kind of torture because they've come through a very congested half of a season, trying to cram in so many matches because we've now got this World Cup. There's no preparation time. A lot of the players are going to suffer muscle injuries. There's going to be depleted teams. Already so many top players are not going to make it because of injuries. And the great thing for me is, you know, we've got some great veteran players playing, like Gareth Bale for Wales, Messi's, Ronaldo. So why don't we just have a Veterans World Cup?
So, Harry, it's this time of the year because it's too hot in Qatar, I guess, in the summer when we would normally have the World Cup to run. But will that actually affect it? Maybe, you know, I'm trying to be positive here. Maybe as viewers here in a wintry, cold UK, it will be quite nice to see players playing in the sunshine out there. We won't let all of this overshadow the action, will we?
Well, you know, I've covered many World Cups and in parts of the world where it's excessively hot, even hotter than it would be in Qatar or as hot. But teams have had chance for 5, 6, 8 weeks to prepare to acclimatise, not just rushed over there and start to play. So it's going to impact on these players enormously, much more than we imagine. it's going to be almost like an experiment, and not a good one at that. So you're going to see not kind of Premier League football where we see, played at a frenetic pace, great football, fast football, intense football. It's going to be slow and boring. But, the trouble is also, I don't think England are going to do very well. I think we've got to lower our expectations. We've got a lot of players who are coming off the back of this intense programme that we've had. I think they're going to, some of them are already suffering. They're not match fit. They're not sharp. I don't think we can expect that much from them. I really think we've got to lower our expectations.
OK, Harry, I can't let you go without asking you about this huge story about Ronaldo today. He's done an interview in which he's basically been slagging off Manchester United. What do you make of this? It's quite unusual for a footballer who's still playing for a team to be openly criticising it in this way.
Well, it's his exit strategy, really. He doesn't want to be playing for that team anymore. He feels he's been disrespected, and he has been disrespected. There's no question in my mind that while everyone is anti-Ronaldo at the moment because he refused to come off the bench and he's caused a lot of problems, sometimes there are players of such a high stature, Maradona, Pele, Messi, Ronaldo, they deserve a greater deal of respect. And it's all very well for this manager to say he has a great deal of respect for him, but he hasn't shown it. And I think there's a lot of both sides being at fault here. And the best thing is to find him a club and let him go. Eventually, he's going to end up, as indeed Messi will be, with Inter Milan at David Beckham's club. So there's going to be a lot of controversy going on. But for me, I don't think it's all Ronaldo's fault.
OK. All right, Harry, thank you. Harry Harris there, sports journalist, as we look forward to the World Cup starting this weekend in Qatar. I'm going to bring my panellists in now. Nick Buckley is still here and Stephen Pound. Football fan, Nick, will it be overshadowed for you by the politics, the corruption, the number of people who lost their lives building the stadiums?
Yeah. Over 6,000 people died building the stadiums. There's 2 points on the World Cup in Qatar. The first thing is football now is all about money. It's not about the game, it's about money. Teams are sold now like playing cards when I was a child. It's about the money. And we're playing the World Cup in Qatar because certain people made a load of backhand money of getting it to Qatar. Is it the right place to go? I don't know. Is the weather going to affect it? Do you know what? People play football all over the world, so I don't know. My main point is the hypocrisy, especially of the England team. They've spent 2 years on their knee shouting Black Lives Matter, rainbow laces, and now they're going to a country where homosexuality is illegal and you can have the death penalty for it, where 6,000 slaves died building the stadiums, where it's almost like a caste system there with the Q80s and everybody else is an underclass. And they're going to go and play football there after lecturing us for 2 years. If you just look at Gary Neville got humiliated on Have I Got News for You over this, it's the hypocrisy. And they don't see it, or more likely, they don't care because of the money they're going to earn.
Stephen, that is a very bleak analysis of football, of humanity, of character Nick's just given us there. Do you think that's what's going on here?
I find it very difficult to disagree with Nick.
Yeah.
This is a corruption cup. It's going to be a bit like, the Olympics in 1939. The politics around it, because it's obviously held in Nazi Germany, and not making a direct comparison, but the politics are going to overshadow the football. And I'm disappointed in David Beckham, really disappointed that he's become a cheerleader for this. It's not like he's short of a few bob. But, there will still be great games. Look at the Brazilian side. They're just one of the most fantastic sides in the world. And look at, Mitrovic for Serbia. There's some great players out there apart from the ones that were mentioned, but it will be overshadowed by that. We still don't know from the embassies of Nepal and Bangladesh and the Philippines what's happened to their citizens who've died there. It's horrific. It's I have to say, it's a bit like the Kerry Packer tours. You remember when they went to apartheid South Africa?
Yeah.
And you just think, people simply shouldn't do that. I know politics and sport is not supposed to mix, but it does. Politics and sport are integral, just as much money is. I think it's an embarrassment, it's nasty. And as for playing football in the winter, I love playing football in the winter. It's glorious, especially when the pitch is a bit wet. You can come in on a sliding tackle and nobody can actually blow up the whistle for you. It's the idea that we're simply going out there because we want a bit of sunshine is rubbish.
Now, talking of corruption, I can't have a former politician here without mentioning the fact that possibly your industry hasn't managed to swerve that particular allegation over the years.
Yeah.
How bad do you think it is now in 2022? I mean, we saw issues over PPE contracts during the pandemic. We, the public, very much got the sense that there were backhanders left, right and centre, contracts being handed out to friends.
Yeah.
Is it as bad as it ever was, Stephen?
Well,
is it worse?
In 2010, David Cameron said the next big scandal is going to be lobbying. I mean, that is the scandal at the moment. Now, the thing, I can kind of sort of slightly nuance the PPE thing. I mean, OK, you know, you meet a bloke in the pub and he says he can run them up for you. There was, compared to the amount of fraud with the business world, with, you know, with the support money, it's just massive, it's eye-watering. However, corruption does exist, but it's not just financial corruption. It's not just the fivers in a Tesco bag. It's also the influence, it's the promises of something. It's the favours that are given. Nobody ever gives you anything for nothing in politics. And I think the great thing you have to learn is that there's always a hook inside the cake. But it is bad. However, people like yourself and people like GB News are exposing it now. The great thing, a lot of nasty things happened in the darkness. There was corruption in the shadows, really bad stuff. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and media sunlight is the best thing. That's the hope for us. Actually, root out the corrupt ones by shining the light of torch of light on them.
Do you think there still should be more light shone on issues that happened during the pandemic? I mean, you know, Matt Hancock, a High Court judge did say at the time, didn't he, that the Secretary of State for Health, Matt Hancock, failed to comply with the public procurement law that required the government to publish contract awards within 30 days. That seemed to get... It was dealt with. It was dealt with officially, but you couldn't help feeling for the public. We felt like it was sort of brushed to one side. We're in a pandemic. The normal rules don't apply, right? We're all under pressure. We're making these decisions. Oh, sorry, it's not us. I still think there needs to be a lot of answers for this, don't you,
Look at
Nick?
Test and Trace. I mean, how many
Test and Trace, 32 billion.
I know, and for what? And that was ludicrous. But on the other hand, a
piece of tech that didn't work.
The vaccine rollout did work. Yeah, so there was one of a few things. But Test and Trace is a huge scandal, and we still haven't come to the bottom of that.
What do we do about it, Nick?
We need a full inquiry into all this, that everything over the 2 years of the pandemic, for several reasons. First, to find out what worked, in case it ever happens again. We need to know what worked. And just as importantly, we need to know what doesn't work so future governments don't make them same mistakes. And it needs to be all out in the public. And I think we're all quite willing to give certain people the benefit of the doubt at the beginning of the pandemic because nobody knew what was going on. Let's make some big decisions when, you know, everyone can make mistakes. But we need to know how long those mistakes went on for and how much of this was just covering our back.
Well, the COVID inquiry is going on at the moment, but I'm not optimistic, and several people I've interviewed about it are not optimistic that the terms of reference are even appropriate as that begins. Right, OK, NHS. The Mirror today, last chance to save our NHS. Now, if that isn't a headline that I've seen on the front page of the paper...
last chance?
This is it, this is it.
No, this is the last
Oh,
chance.
this is the last chance.
Okay, it's the last one.
This headline, I'd love somebody to do how many times this has actually run in newspapers in the last 50 years, I would say. Is it, Stephen?
Well,
is it now genuinely on its last legs?
Yeah. Well, I was born on the same day as the NHS back in July 1948, you know, and I'm, you know, fairly healthy, you know, as are my 9 brothers and sisters, you know, who were all born on that time. But the reality is, 2 years after the NHS was formed in July 48, there was a thing called the Guillebaud Report, which actually said, you know, you can no longer have spectacles and dentistry on the NHS. It's financially unsustainable. The NHS, as originally structured by Beveridge, relied on a couple of things. Men leaving school at 15, retiring at 65 and dying at 75, and women not working. So the women would stay at home, look after the elderly and the infirm. So the financial basis of the NHS was flawed from the kick-off.
Yeah.
The ideology, brilliant, marvellous idea. But we're now spending, what, 83 billion a year. I would have thought...
And rising.
If there's one area of public life where we can actually say this is a cross-party issue, why can't we all come together and talk continuing care and the NHS and just say, look, at the moment it is cursed by political antipathy and short-termism. Nobody would attack... The only independent MP I can think of in my time in Parliament was elected for the Save Kidderminster Hospital campaign. You know, and in Ireland, there are 5 TDs elected on Save Hospital campaign. So it's what we call the third rail in politics. You don't touch it.
But you see, people have a very special place in their heart for the National Health Service, don't they? And that's why it's become political, because it's a vote winner. And people will look for the party who is going to save the NHS that I need, that my children might need, that my parents need. And that is who I'm going to vote for. But it's changing, Nick. I feel like something that is very fundamental in the air at the moment. To all intents and purposes, purposes. It isn't working, and there is a privatisation going on beneath our very noses.
And there has been since Tony Blair. I think the pandemic has damaged the reputation of the NHS because we closed the whole country down to save the institution that should have been saving us during the pandemic. It was crazy what we did. Half my family work in the NHS. Nurses, midwives work in A&E, the Children's Hospital, Dental Hospital. Literally half my family work there. And by the way, not one of them's ever gone to a food bank. So this thing about the food bank's a load of rubbish. The first thing we need to do with the NHS, because you're right, it's very political and everybody loves it because it saves people's lives. The first thing we need to do is have a national conversation about what is the NHS for?
Yeah.
Because at the moment, the NHS does everything for everybody, regardless of what you need, what you want. And what gets invented tomorrow, we're going to do all that as well. We need to have a discussion because just off the top of my head, I would stop all IVF.
Ooh, harsh, Nick Buckley.
I'd stop all IVF. My grandchild is an IVF baby. I love her dearly, but I would stop all IVF on the NHS because it's not what it was for. I have friends who are semi-professional footballers who are at doctors and hospitals almost every month with their knees, their ankles, having them all fixed. You need private insurance, mate, because you're a semi-professional footballer. Breast enlargements, nose jobs, there's things which the NHS shouldn't be doing.
Well, that raises the issue then, if it's about a value judgment, should the NHS be treating people who smoke? Should the NHS be treating people who drink too much or eat too much? There's nobody left. You're going to have empty receptions if we discount anybody that does anything that might at any point damage their health, surely.
I think there's a slight difference there. I wouldn't stop people who smoked or people who are obese because then you're making value judgments.
But you're making a value judgment if you say you might want bigger boobs, but you shouldn't have them on the NHS.
Because that's not health related.
But they would say it's their mental health related.
Everything's mental health related. So there's a debate. Hence why we need a public debate. I'm not saying what I say is right. I'm just saying they're my opinions.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it and let's find what the general public want the NHS to deliver. And then let's work out how much that's going to cost. And then we need to be honest with people. And we need to say, this is what we can have, but it's going to cost you 15% of your wage every month just to fund the NHS. And we're going to have the same discussion a decade from now.
It's wasteful, though, isn't it, Stephen?
Yeah.
That's what I think. Any interactions I have with the NHS, I cannot get over. Even what I see with my own eyes, and I'm there as a patient or the mother of a patient, the waste that goes on.
I'm sorry, at the moment, the internal market is a disaster. The idea that you've got individual hospitals, individual trusts bidding against each other, it's a whole layer, a stultifying, sludge-laden layer of bureaucracy on top of it. But the extraordinary thing is, if you read Beveridge, you read the report, don't forget, he wrote this in the middle of the war.
Yeah.
It's incredible. What he said was, the NHS, as I envisage it, will only need to be around for 10 to 15 years. Then, because improved public health will actually reduce the amount of hospital admissions, it'll taper away. But, of course, the problem is we now have an elastic demand and an inelastic supply. People want more and more and more. I think, and I'm not going to agree too much with you for obvious reasons, but on this occasion, absolutely right. Why can't we have a speakers' conference and to actually get together and just say, look, this is so big, this is actually fundamental. But people, you're right, Bev, I mean, maybe we're not a very religious nation anymore because we have the NHS as our sort of state religion.
Yeah.
We've got to start being objective about it. I mean, my wife's a nurse, my sister's a nurse, I worked in the Middlesex Hospital for years. I've got a huge affection for it. But I hope I can be objective because the idea you deify a structure or an organisation, you're not doing it a favour, you're not doing yourself a favour, and you're not doing the country a favour.
Nick Buckley, Stephen Pound, thank you so much. You're not going anywhere, are you, at the moment? You have been getting in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk. It's a big day in the immigration debate. Suella Braverman has been out there. Terry got in touch to say, Suella, quote, it's no silver bullet. That's what she says. The mainstream media will now say that she's calling migrants werewolves, as invasion hasn't worked in getting us sacked yet. Of course it won't work. More bread and circuses. And Stephen said we need to be asking how many have or are being sent back. Tax hikes as well to pay for their upkeep. This has to stop. Do go on Twitter, won't you, at GB News, and let us know on your poll. We want to know whether you believe that the UK's new £65 million deal with France will fix the influx of illegal immigration. Cast your vote now. Right, that's it. The first hour. It's flown by, hasn't it? We're going to be right back in just a moment after this weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's been a misty, murky start for many, but the fog now clearing and leaving a lot of cloud behind. with some rain. A weak weather front is crossing the country from the west. That's brought some splashes of rain to western areas, the southwest of England, Wales, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland earlier in the day. It is edging its way eastwards, not bringing a great deal of wet weather, but it will continue to bring some light to moderate outbreaks of rain to western and then eventually central Scotland into parts of mid-Wales and then moving into parts of central southern England. Ahead of that, we've still got a lot of cloud, still got some low cloud covering some higher parts, so fairly gloomy out there. Not as mild as it has been, but still temperatures above average, 15 Celsius in London. Fresher air coming into Northern Ireland, 12 to 13 here, with some sunshine later in the day. And that clear slot transfers east overnight, but rain and strong winds return to Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. And this area of rain is heavier, it's more intense. There'll be some lively weather coming through overnight across western parts of the UK, that's for sure. But with all of that weather coming in from the west, it's going to be a mild night and an unsettled start to Tuesday for most. We've got this heavy and persistent rain. We've got this strong wind coming up from the south as well. The rain clears the west again, returning to sunshine for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest for a time, but further showers and some longer spells of rain arrive here, whilst the more persistent wet weather ends up across eastern Scotland and northern England by the afternoon. A cooler day, 11 to 14 for most. And it's going to turn increasingly windy. The wind coming in from the southwest will be particularly strong around parts of Wales and the southwest of England later on Tuesday, bringing a lot of showers in from the southwest as well, whilst the more persistent rain edges to the northeast of Scotland. The weather stays highly changeable for the second half of this week. Heavy rain, longer spells of wet weather and strong winds.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales
And Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News, on radio, on TV and online. Now, until midday, we are still got lots to come. We're going to be looking ahead to the Chancellor's autumn budget, which is coming up later this week, and I can't lie, I'm finding it a little bit terrifying. We're going to find out what it means for the money in your pocket with Vicky Price. Also, I'll be giving out my very first Turner Prize. This is an award, a huge honour for the lucky recipient of somebody who's standing up for what they believe in, and I'll tell you who gets my first award towards the end of this first hour this morning. We've got all of that coming up after a look at the latest news.
A very good morning to you. 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The UK and France have signed a historic agreement to tackle the migrant crisis. Now, a warning, the video I'm going to show you has flash photography. British staff are going to be working in French border control rooms for the first time, and the number of officers patrolling beaches will be boosted by 40%. The new deal's designed to stop people crossing the Channel illegally. Over 41,000 asylum seekers have made the journey so far this year. Other measures include an investment in CCTV and dog detection teams, as well as plans to better equip officers with drones and night vision devices. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the deal, worth up to £63 million to France, will benefit both countries.
We take a multi-dimensional approach. There's no single answer, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. Our cooperation and collaboration with the French on the Channel, on the UK coastline, on the French coastline, is absolutely integral to ensuring that there is a robust barrier preventing people disembarking from the French beaches in the first place.
GB News has learnt that 10 people tried to escape authorities in Kent this morning after arriving on a small boat. They ran away after their dinghy landed on St Margaret's Bay between Dover and Deal at around 8 o'clock. GB News understands that so far 3 individuals have now been detained. Police and Border Force officials are still searching the area for those who managed to get away. The Prime Minister says Thursday's autumn budget will put the country's public finances on a sustainable trajectory. Rishi Sunak's working to reassure and convince the markets that the government has a sound plan to fix the economy. The Chancellor has warned that everyone will need to pay a bit more tax and said sacrifices are needed to balance the books. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, told GB News the upcoming budget will protect the most vulnerable.
We will always support the people who are struggling, but we also have to make sure that we balance the books. And the decisions that the Prime Minister and Chancellor have already taken has increased confidence in the markets. It has reduced the cost of borrowing from the high point that we saw earlier on in the autumn. These things are positive steps, but we do still have tough decisions to make and real hard work to do.
A workers' trade union is warning the Prime Minister the autumn statement is his last chance to save the NHS. Unite is calling for Rishi Sunak to use this week's budget to fix underfunding across the NHS and avoid industrial action. They say the health service is on the brink of collapse. The Prime Minister will call on world leaders to cooperate to fix global economic instabilities at the G20 summit this week. Rishi Sunak arrived in Indonesia last night for the conference in Bali tomorrow. He'll appeal to fellow leaders to offer government support to the most vulnerable. Mr Sunak will promote a 5-point plan, including urging allies to transition away from dependency on Russian energy. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has appeared to deny on camera reports that he was taken to hospital after arriving in Bali for the G20. He was said to have been treated for a heart condition. Lavrov described it as false reporting. Bali's governor said that he did attend for a checkup but left in good health. Russia's war in Ukraine is going to dominate talks at the conference. President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the newly recaptured city of Kherson. He addressed his troops just days after Russian forces were forced to withdraw after months of occupation. President Zelensky, who's accused Moscow of committing more than 400 war crimes in the area, also thanked NATO and other allies for their support. Scientists in the UK have launched a trial screening programme for type 1 diabetes, which they say could transform the way it's identified. Around 20,000 children aged between 3 and 13 are being invited to take part in the study at Birmingham University. The aim is to assess the risk of developing the condition at the earliest stage possible for a quick and safe diagnosis. The King is 74 today. It's his first birthday as monarch. Gun salutes will be fired across London in honour of the event, and the Household Cavalry Band is playing Happy Birthday during changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. The King is expected to celebrate his birthday privately. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops. Now back to Bev.
Very good morning. It is just after 11 o'clock on a Monday. Welcome to Bev Turner Today on GB News. In the next hour, Jeremy Hunt is priming us to face a brutal budget statement. Higher taxes, less spending. We're going to be finding out why. He's warned that everyone will have to be ready to pay more tax, but he said he does not accept the premise that Brexit will make us poorer. I'd love to know what you want to see from the budget on Thursday. And the UK and France have this morning, hot off the press, signed an historic agreement to tackle the migrant crisis. The deal, which is worth up to £63 million a year from us to the French, is aimed at stopping people illegally crossing the English Channel. It's going to cost us an extra £8 million for 100 more French officers to patrol the beaches. Is it going to work? We will find out, I guess. It's only a matter of time. At the moment, you lot are getting in touch on our Twitter poll and telling us you don't think it is going to work. You don't seem to have an awful lot of sense, an awful lot of faith, but you are making a lot of sense. And I'm going to be checking in with my guests. They're going to be popping in for coffee and a chat about the stories that have caught their eye this morning. We're going to have Toby Young joining us as well this morning, alongside Stephen Pound and Nick Buckley in the next hour. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. So please do email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews to give your opinion on anything and everything that we are discussing. So, Jeremy Hunt is reportedly preparing a package to be announced on Thursday that will see £20 billion of tax rises and £35 billion worth of spending cuts. Is this the recipe that we need to strengthen our economy? Well, joining me now is Vicky Price, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Good morning, Vicky. Lovely to see you. So Jeremy Hunt
The connection isn't terribly good, I have to say.
Don't worry. Well, let's see. We'll see how far we can get. It's always worth talking to you, particularly on a week like this. This is going to be a very big week for British people. It's going to be a very big week for the markets, for the economy. Why do you think Jeremy Hunt is already setting us up to be disappointed on Thursday? Because that's what I'm hearing. Is it because then whatever he does deliver to us won't be as bad as we're expecting?
I think it's a combination of that, plus needing to satisfy the capital markets that he's got a plan ahead and that we have a path for reducing the debt to GDP ratio over a period of time. The interesting thing would be to see over what period. The expectation is he might delay that period for a bit. So we may be looking at perhaps 5 years ahead. If that is the case, then who knows what may happen towards the latter part of that period. Maybe some of the tax cuts aren't going to be the tax increases aren't going to be that big in the longer term, and maybe some of the tax cuts will be less when it comes to it because miraculously the economy may have recovered or we're approaching an election. So I think it's both politics, it's economics, of course, that matters a lot. But underlying all that is the need to really ensure the markets that we know what we're doing so that rates stay relatively low. That's long-term rates in particular, and that we're carrying on borrowing without having to pay too much for that debt.
This is what I don't understand, Vicky. We're at a time when we're having a slump. We're kind of bouncing along the bottom at the moment, aren't we? People are finding that we've got less disposable income at the end of the month to spend. Normally, when we're facing a recession, the government would be trying to stimulate the economy, to reduce interest rates, to increase spending so that there is more money going through the system. Why is he now doing the polar opposite of what we would expect? Is it purely because of the pandemic?
No, it's mainly because of the markets that have decided that we're borrowing far too much. And if you remember, we had the mini budget on September the 23rd, and the markets reacted very negatively. The Bank of England had to intervene and calm the markets down, and a lot of the tax cuts that were announced then have had to be reversed. So what he needs to do is satisfy the markets that we have a plan ahead. But you are absolutely right. It is a very strange situation to be in. First of all, we don't really know how big that hole is supposed to be in the longer term. A lot will depend on what happens to the economy. The second thing is that, yes, with interest rates going up as they are, and with those tax increases happening and possibly public sector tax cut, spending cuts as well, we will end up in a situation where the economy slows down even faster than what possibly the Bank of England had forecast just the other day, where they expected recession for the next 2 years. And if you look at what's going on elsewhere, no one else is doing what we're doing. So, in other words, yes, interest rates are going up everywhere in the US, in Europe by the European Central Bank, but in fact, there is huge support being given to the economy right now to sustain growth. And what we saw in the last quarter is that the major countries in Europe all had an increase in their GDP. We had a reduction in our GDP already. And also the latest industrial production data, which just came out this morning, suggests that Europe has continued to grow in the early part of the autumn, whereas our indicators are the manufacturing and services are going downwards.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make any sense to me, Vicky. Well, do we have any idea what he's going to do at the moment about the property market? I'm reading capital gains tax reliefs and allowances paid on shares and second homes could be trimmed. It's the middle classes that should be frightened by this budget. Actually, all of us, because he said everyone's going to pay more tax regardless of what you earn. It's not going to make him popular, is it?
No, and you're absolutely right. The one interesting thing about capital gains tax, there have been so many leaks, and you don't actually know what exactly is going to happen. I mean, we know a few things that will happen after all, probably, such as benefits will increase in line with inflation. That's what the latest word on the street is, and that the pension triple lock will remain, so we're going to get substantial increase for pensioners. But on the capital gains tax, the latest suggestions are that there isn't going to be a change in the rate, but what there might be is in the allowance, in the sense that, you know, where you starting to pay capital gains tax, and that may be reduced, in fact halved is what is suggested. So there could be ways of tinkering around the edges. Something will also, I think, will affect the sort of dividend tax rate. That may also change and go up a little bit. So you may have some changes of that sort, but nothing major, because obviously there is a whole, constituency, if you like, of homeowners and people who have been involved in investing in the property market who would be hugely disappointed, who probably, I'm guessing, to a considerable extent also vote, for the Conservative Party, possibly, who would be really disappointed. So you talked about whether he'll remain popular. Well, he gave a lot of money at the time of COVID because he had to, like all other countries had to do. He's now going back to the thing that Liz Truss was concerned about, which is the Treasury orthodoxy of cutting back to satisfy the market. So he's going to be careful not to completely alienate a large part of what is a natural Conservative voter, and I think he's going to be careful about the capital gains tax. But who knows? Those are the leaks so far, and so far he keeps saying we want to be transparent. So maybe those leaks are correct. Maybe he's giving it all to us, so we have no surprises.
Maybe. But I find the whole thing very baffling. What do you expect his justifications to be on, Vicky? If these leaks prove to be true and we all see tax hikes, or perhaps it will just be that tax raises are cancelled or postponed. And if he does clamp down on things like capital gains tax, on first properties, not just second houses, what will his justification be to the public? Will it just be about we need to calm the markets? Because I don't think that's going to cut it with people.
No, you're right. I think what he'd say is that we need to get inflation under control because inflation is bad news. But of course, inflation is already down because of this electricity price freeze. Not down, but less than it would otherwise be because of this electricity price freeze, which of course in itself is going to end in April now instead of being there for 2 years. So he's going to have to say that I'm doing this to ensure that we have a strong base for growth for the future. But we know full well businesses are already screaming and saying, we don't see this base for growth for the future. We're going to have possibly cuts in infrastructure spending. We're going to have more tax, which will be paid, corporation tax going up 25%. We're going to have also individuals who are not going to spend that much because you're taking away their taxes but just not raising their tax allowances. That's going to be a big impact on spending capability, really, for individuals. And then, of course, energy prices are going to go up again. So, and where is the investment? Where is the growth? Where are the people also that we need right now to ensure that we carry on producing, we don't lose that type of competitiveness across? And that's why they are also concerned about migration and what's happening now. But yes, it is a very strange environment. And if he manages to get away with it, well, that would be quite something.
Well, let's see. Vicky Pryce, no doubt we will talk to you as the week goes on. Thank you so much. And your connection maintained throughout, which is also fantastic. Right, what do you think? I can't help but listen to the stories today about us giving £65 million to France to fix the migrant crisis. when we're all about to take tax increases for all of us. You've got in touch, we were talking about the NHS as well, another endless money part. Margaret has said perhaps if they got rid of the top-heavy managerial positions and diversity managers, they'd be a lot better off. I am disgusted with it. And Dave said, I'm 66 years old, and for years I have said the NHS needs a complete overhaul. Take out the overstaffed middle and upper management. There are too many levels. How can drugs purchased by the NHS be bought cheaper from Tesco? We are spending £85 billion a year, and we deserve better value. I couldn't agree more, Dave. Right, keep your messages coming. gbviews@gbnews.uk. OK, the biggest story of the day. The number of migrants crossing the English Channel this year has surpassed 40,000, the highest number ever recorded. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has signed a £63 million deal in Paris to prevent people crossing the English Channel in small boats. She's come under growing pressure over the issue and had this to say today.
We take a multi-dimensional approach. There's no single answer, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. Our cooperation and collaboration with the French on the Channel, on the UK coastline, on the French coastline, is absolutely integral to ensuring that there is a robust barrier preventing people disembarking from the French beaches in the first place.
So that was Suella Braverman talking just this morning, only a few moments ago. So joining us now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Good morning, Mark. Good to see you, as always. Now, a boat has already landed this morning, hasn't it? What's going on where you are?
Well, where I am is actually the Holiday Inn in Maidenhead, one of hundreds of hotels across the country that have been requisitioned by the Home Office to house migrants. And for 6 months now, this hotel has been housing hundreds of migrants here. It was, according to locals, in fact, one person who worked here until that contract was signed, told us that actually the hotel had been refurbished and then that deal was signed to hand it over to this third-party contractor on behalf of the Home Office to then accommodate these asylum seekers here, and they've been here ever since. And of course we know that the numbers in hotels are simply continuing to grow because the numbers coming across the Channel are not abating. They are growing, with, again, this weekend, more than 900 arriving on Saturday, more than 800 arriving yesterday, and hundreds more, I'm told, arriving this morning. You mentioned that boat on the beach. It was at St Margaret's between Dover and Deal, washed up, was on the beach line as our producer was down there filming, showing that boat on the beach as the 10 people who were on board that boat disappeared, he said, off into the local area. 3 of those people have now been apprehended by authorities, but we're told that the 7 remaining people who were on the boat and ran off have simply disappeared and gone to, well, who knows where. So it is a problem that Suella Braverman knows she has to get to grips with, as her predecessors have known as well. But trying to solve that is going to be very difficult. She admitted there in that clip of interview there is no one silver bullet, one solution to this. It has to be a holistic approach. Yeah. And one aspect of that, it's controversial, is to give the French £63 million to boost the number of police officers on their beaches. We saw at the weekend there, Bev, our producer was in Dunkirk as he saw groups of migrants clashing with French police officers, sticks and stones being thrown towards them because they were frustrated. The police in France were doing their job. They were stopping them getting to the beach on that occasion.
Extraordinary. For anybody listening on the radio, we are seeing the pictures of these migrants wanting to move over to the UK and being pushed back by the police, and it all coming to blows. Mark, thank you so much. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. Do you know what makes my blood boil? Thank you, Mark. What makes my blood boil is the fact that we've just been talking about a budget with tax rises. And in the meantime, our taxpayers' money is spending £6.8 million a day to put people in luxury accommodation, like the Holiday Inn in Maidenhead. Depends on your definition of luxury. But by anybody's standards, and Mark just said it's been renovated, it's probably extremely nice. Right, there is still plenty more to come after the break. I'm going to move back over to the sofa. I'm going to check in again on my panel. And by the way, our Twitter poll that we've been running so that you can let us know whether you think this deal with France is going to work. 98% of you so far say no. It's a vote of no confidence, isn't it? But keep voting on it, won't you? My panel have been scouring the newspapers and online for brand new stories that might have caught their eye this morning. See you after this short break.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Good morning, it's 11:24. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner today on GB News. Now, let me reintroduce you to my panel this morning. I am delighted that he's not left the building yet. Labour MP Stephen Pound is here. Charity campaigner Nick Buckley, MBE. MBE, not OBE? MBE.
MBE.
MBE. OK, do better next time. There's another one. And a new recruit this hour. I'm delighted to say the General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, has found the time to come in on my first week of the New Look Bev Turner today. So we've got stories that have been breaking as we've been on air. This one, I mean, it's a neighbours in dispute. A pensioner 72 faces a £30,000 court bill after blocking the shared drive with pot plants during a 10-year war with their next-door neighbour. These are in the paper quite frequently, Stephen. I find it hard to imagine how you could fight so much with your neighbour that it goes on for 10 years and you end up paying £30,000 in court fees in the end.
Well, it starts off as pot plants on a shared driveway. It ends up with sort of mutual loathing and refusal to back down. I mean, I took a piece of legislation called the High Hedges Bill through the Parliament because people used to grow Cypressus lelandii and the next-door neighbours would be like darkness at noon, you know, you're constantly being overshadowed. And people died. There was actually 2 cases where people were killed in disputes over, you know, the high hedges and these Cypressus lelandii. But this one, it says something about the pathology of, not just the pathology, the personality of the individuals involved. Who on earth's got £30,000 to spend arguing with their neighbours? Just move if necessary. But pot plants on the driveway. The key thing here is the shared parking. And as a suburban MP for many, many years, the one thing that really excited my constituents, the one thing that really got the juices flowing was a parking space.
Yes, and a dropped curb and to do
luxury.
So. But you know what, Toby? I think over the last couple of years, I mean, these stories are, you know, perennial, aren't they? They're often coming back, people falling out with their neighbours. They're stories of stubbornness and refusal to back down. But something happened very kind of pernicious with our relationship with our neighbours in the last couple of years, didn't it? Suddenly we feel we have a right to impose our views on our neighbours.
Yeah, well, I don't think it helped that people were encouraged to dob in their neighbours if they weren't complying with the lockdown policy or COVID restrictions. That encouraged a kind of Stasi-like side of the British character that normally is kind of suppressed to come out, and we haven't quite put it back in its box yet. We need to work a bit harder on that.
It's surprising, actually, because it clearly was always there, Nick, wasn't it, this side of the British character, that we do want to dob somebody in, we just never had the reason to do so, and suddenly the government handed us a massive stick to beat our neighbours with.
It's human nature. You know, humans are the same all over the world. You know, we're the same as the East Germans were in the 70s and 80s. It's just that our culture and our government was slightly different. But if we're given the same circumstances, we will act just like East Germans, just like Rwandans during the genocide, just like Nazi Germany. It's in all of us. I mean, that's what we need to be aware of and careful of.
Oof, chilling. That's a bit deep for a Monday morning, isn't it? I'm a bit terrified now. Right, Toby, let's talk about Stonewall, something you feel very strongly about. What have they been up to?
Yeah, well, at the Free Speech Union, we quite often get contacted pretty much every week by people who get into trouble in their workplace because they refuse to declare their preferred gender pronouns. Often they're gender-critical feminists who don't believe that, you know, sex is something you can just choose at will. It's binary and immutable. You can't alter your birth sex. So they don't want to have to choose their pronouns because that is conceding too much to the idea that actually sex is a choice. It's a social construct, just like gender. And they dispute that. They don't like that idea. And it seems like Stonewall is one of the organisations that's been responsible for seeding this idea across workplaces, particularly in the public sector. Companies, departments that want to be Stonewall diversity champions get a gold star from the organisation, will have a policy in the workplace whereby you have to declare your gender pronouns, and that upsets a lot of people.
Is this all under the banner of this environmental social governance? Like, is that where this sits?
I think it sits more under DIE, diversity, inclusion and equity, or DIE for short. But the interesting thing about this story is that Stonewall have gone one further. They're always going one further. And in this case, they're encouraging workplaces who want to earn the gold star to give employees the option of having 2 email addresses.
Oh,
so if they want to switch genders, they can just change their email addresses. If they change their first names, that's not going to cause any confusion, is it?
No. So you could have, like, Mrs. Toby Young at toby.co.uk or Mr. Toby Young, depending
on which side of the bed I get up on in the morning.
Are you serious?
No, they're encouraging workplaces to do this, to make them more trans inclusive. And God knows what it's going to cost the taxpayer.
Same with ID
public
passes.
departments.
You'll be given 2 ID passes, one with your male name, one with your female name, in case you change during the day.
I mean, I quite like the idea of anything that will get me through an ID system, to be honest. I'll choose it. But, Nick, the world's gone a bit mad, hasn't it? Is that what this story is about? That surely an employer has to take the lead on this and say, no, enough of this. I'm not going to pander to it.
There's 2 lines you can go down on this, and I always go down that humans are greedy and want money. So you can either look at it and say they believe all this, Stonewall, and they're fighting for not gender equality, but gender identity and on all this craziness, or in 2014 when gay marriage was made legal, and that should have been the end of Stonewall. They achieved everything they ever said they wanted to achieve. But rather than closing down, they decided to add a T in a queue and start fighting for lots of other stuff.
And a plus.
And a plus, because they wanted to keep their wonderful pensions, they wanted to keep their wonderful high-paid jobs, so they created new problems to keep on fighting. And I believe that's what this is.
Right.
This is a charity that doesn't want to close because it's achieved everything it wanted to achieve, and now it's about my pension.
But isn't it interesting, if you actually look at the midterms in America, there's a huge debate going on within the Democratic Party at the present time, where they're saying sort of mainstream Democrats, not AOC and the other people like that. They're people who are actually concentrating on bread and butter issues, law and order, you know, the issues that actually matter to people, rather than gender-critical pronouns. They're the ones who did very, very well. And I think in many cases in these, we do follow America, sadly. And I think the debate that's taking place in the Democratic Party, obviously nothing compared with what's happening within the Republicans, but you know, let's not intrude on somebody else's grief. But I think that will impact on us. I think your point is right. Stonewall was created because of the Stonewall riots. If you remember when the police raided this club in New York, you know, we've now moved on from that. I mean, the leader of Stonewall's in the House of Lords, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, but you did a beautiful segue there to the American elections, Stephen, so thank you very much for that, because that's where we were going next. Toby, what did you make of the results last week? It wasn't the successful outcome that the Republicans were expecting. Many of us expected Biden to get an absolute drubbing, and he didn't.
Yes, we were expecting a red wave in which the Republicans were going to win control of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and it looks as though the Democrats are going to retain the Senate, and the House of Representatives still up for grabs. We don't quite know how that's going to pan out yet. Could be a Republican gain. But I think Trump was hoping for this big success so he could announce his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election on the back of it, and he still may. But now it looks as though he's doing it in the teeth of, you know, public unhappiness with his association with the Republican Party. Many of the candidates that he expected to win, the Republican candidates, were people who questioned the election result last time and thought that it was stolen, and there doesn't seem to be that much public tolerance, at least amongst kind of swing centrist voters, for that stolen election line. I mean, my hope is that Ron DeSantis, who was the successful gubernatorial candidate in Florida, got re-elected with an increased majority.
20% majority.
He got the lockdown right. He was one of the few governors of American states to get the lockdown completely right, and his election was almost a referendum on his lockdown policy, and it got a universal thumbs up from the Florida electorate. And I think he's a bit like Trump in some ways, but competent, not crazy. So he'd be if he's the candidate in 2024, and if Biden is the Democratic candidate, I think he'll win in a landslide. Trump, on the other hand, probably.
Stevie's shaking his head, but we haven't got time to pick this up. We might talk about it again in just a moment. We've got to take a quick break from this. Prince Harry has told bereaved military children they are not alone in a Remembrance Sunday letter. It was very touching. I'll tell you what he said in just a minute, because we're going to be joined by the founder of a charity for bereaved British Forces children. But first, here are the morning's headlines with Rosie.
Good morning. It is 11:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The UK and France have signed a historic agreement to tackle the migrant crisis. A warning, this video's got flash photography in it. British staff will be working in French border control rooms for the first time, and the number of officers patrolling beaches will be boosted by 40%. The new deal's designed to stop people crossing the Channel illegally. Over 40,000 asylum seekers have made the journey so far this year. Other measures include an investment in CCTV and dog detection teams, as well as plans to better equip officers with drones and night vision devices. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the deal, that's worth up to £63 million to France, will benefit both countries.
We take a multi-dimensional approach. There's no single answer, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. Our cooperation and collaboration with the French on the Channel, on the UK coastline, on the French coastline, is absolutely integral to ensuring that there is a robust barrier preventing people disembarking from the French beaches in the first place.
The Prime Minister says Thursday's autumn budget will put the country's public finances on a sustainable trajectory. Rishi Sunak's working to reassure and convince the markets that the government has a sound plan to fix the economy. The Chancellor's warned that everyone will need to pay a bit more tax and said sacrifices are needed to balance the books. The King is 74 today. It's his first birthday as monarch. Buckingham Palace has released a new portrait of the King as he officially becomes Ranger of Windsor Great Park, 70 years after his father was appointed to the post. Well, gun salutes are also being fired across London for the celebration, and the Household Cavalry Band has played Happy Birthday during the changing of the guard. But on your TV, online and DAB+ radio, it's GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of the markets. The pound will buy you $1.1759 and €1.1425. The price of gold is £1,494 and 22 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,349 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking. My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, it is 11:38. You are watching and listening to Bev Turner Today on GB News, and I'm still getting used to talking about myself in the third person. It just feels completely wrong. Now, losing a loved one is always challenging, but especially if you are young. Well, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, has told bereaved children of armed forces that they are not alone during Remembrance Sunday and that he shares a bond with them after losing a parent himself. Harry wrote an emotional letter to children at Scotty's Little Soldiers, a charity for bereaved British Forces children. So joining us now is Nikki Scott, founder of Scotty's Little Soldiers, a charity dedicated to supporting bereaved British Forces children and young people. Thank you so much for joining GB News this morning, Nikki. So how did it come about that Harry wrote this letter for your charity?
So we've had a really good relationship, really positive relationship from Prince Harry for quite a while now. He's reached out to the charity and our members that we support quite a few times. And then we heard from his team and himself that he was thinking of our members and wanted to do something to make sure that they knew he was thinking of them this remembrance. So, sent in the letter that we then sent out to all of the children and young people we support.
How many children a year, roughly, Nikki, are there in the UK or at any given moment who've lost lost parents in the armed forces?
No one knows actually exactly how many bereaved British Forces children and young people there are out there. Actually, it's something that we try to find out constantly on a daily basis. We know there will be, we've got a long-term goal of supporting 1,000 plus by 2030. And we know there are probably a lot more than that. We have newly bereaved children coming and joining our charity on a regular basis, like weekly basis. The number goes up. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, really. It's,
Yeah, but very sadly, the number goes up. How did you get involved, Nikki?
So my husband, Corporal Lee Scott, was killed in Afghanistan in 2009, and I quickly realised, the effects his death had on our 2 young children, Kai and Brooke. And there was just, some great UK military charities out there doing great work, but there was very limited support for bereaved British Forces children who had experienced the death of a parent. So that's kind of where the charity has stemmed from. And as we've grown, we've realised there's a lot more support that's needed. And so the charity's growing with the services that we offer.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And it's always hard when a child loses a parent. It's the worst possible, imaginable event in a child's life. How is it different, do you think, for children who lose their parents when they are in an active service? How do you handle that differently?
Yeah, so, I mean, like you said, for any child or young person that experiences the death of a parent, it's really hard. You never get over that. And there's triggers along the way, different milestones that the children face that will trigger those feelings and emotions. So, but I think for bereaved military children, I think it's very much they're part of a military community, and then you lose that community. You not always, it's not anyone's fault, but you get disattached from that community. So at Scotty's, it's a way of bringing them back into that community again, making sure they never feel alone. And there's so many times when, there's remembrance, for example, this weekend, there's some really key events, the war in Ukraine, that can just really trigger the emotions. And also, for myself and my children, we were living in a military garrison, in an army accommodation. So not only did we, have to deal with all our grief, but we had to move house, change schools, leave all our friends behind. So that's why Scotty's is so important, to keep that community together.
Oh, amazing. What an amazing job you do. And just sum up to me what it means when Harry speaks out publicly and when he reaches out to the children. How special is that?
Very special. And this weekend, you can probably tell by the look of me and the sound of me, but it is an emotional weekend for any bereaved family, military family. And to just hear from Prince Harry, it means the world. I can't even put it into words. The feedback from the members, the children themselves, has been incredible. Just to know that I mean, one young lady said to me, she's 13, she said, I just feel like suddenly I'm so important. Prince Harry has written to me, and he remembered, knows about us, and that you can't get. That's just so special. You can't beat that. They just being remembered is so important to these children and young people.
Thank you, Nikki. Keep up the amazing work, won't you? Thank you so much for telling us all about it on GB News this morning. Nikki Scott there, founder of Scotty's Little Soldiers, a charity dedicated to supporting bereaved British Forces children and young people. Nick, I want to bring you in. You lost your dad when you were very young, didn't you?
Yeah, 6.
Yeah, what happened?
So my dad died in a car crash on Halloween. Halloween evening, which is quite spooky. I mean, it's a great charity that we've just heard about there. All I would say is children are more resilient than we give them credit for. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy, but, children can get over these things and do get over these things and need help and support and need charities like that. What we don't think about is children who do worse, their fathers are normally alive. So missing out on a father and not having a father in your life, when you know he's alive, damages children more than losing your father in an accident or armed forces.
Because you've got that sense of rejection that your father is alive and he's not involved in your life. Stephen, it's very, we talk about Prince Harry a lot, and obviously his wife drives most of us up the wall, right? We don't always agree with what she's been doing. We don't like the way that she's thrown the royal family under the bus and criticised them. I think it's easy to forget with Harry that he went through this personality-changing trauma as a child, and maybe we should let him off the hook a bit.
I think we have to cut him some slack.
I think so.
He's been there, he's actually been there in Helmand, in a place that I don't think any of us would actually willingly go there. He's actually been there. But look, my wife was born in an RAF base in Warrington, and I know a little bit about these service families. But if I may just say one very important thing, the Royal British Legion exists to help not just service personnel, but their families as well. And I'm the president of the Greenford branch of the Legion. One of our members, Chris Casey, who was killed in Iraq, his family are invited on Remembrance Sunday to actually stand there with the dignitaries doing the presentation, and we will welcome and this is the parents of the slain, their children, anybody who's in that family. The Royal British Legion is there to help them. It's not just for serving military personnel. And I'm sorry to underline that, but I wish people mustn't suffer in silence. The Legion exists to provide another level of family support. Please, please get in touch with us.
Yeah. Toby, it is the Monday after Remembrance Weekend. We're talking about Prince Harry and the children there that have lost parents in the services. How do you think our relationship in the UK is to our military at the moment? It's time to reflect on it on a weekend like this, on Remembrance Weekend, isn't it? What were your thoughts yesterday?
Yeah, I think we often imagine that we are a nation full of self-loathing, self-doubt, that when we think of our armed forces, we think of colonialism and the empire and not something to be proud of. That's the kind of story often told, and often told in schools as well to children. But actually, on things like Remembrance Sunday, you realise that, beneath that superficial veneer, that spin, there's a huge amount of patriotism and still a huge amount of self-belief and pride in this country. So it's really great to be reminded of.
Yeah, it is. Now, we've nearly got to the end of the programme. I can't believe it's whizzed by, but a new section of the show now, every week. Sometimes maybe a few times a week, depending on who you send me with your suggestions. I'm going to be awarding the Turner Prize, but it's not for art. It's for someone who has stood up for what they believe in, someone who's fought for our freedoms, maybe someone who has battled the underdog and won. Toby Young, your name might be on this trophy one day.
Well, that's why I was here.
No, sorry, not today. Oh, you might win it another day. Sorry, we got you here under false pretences. But listen, today it's somebody that I think deserves this award enormously, and we're going to find out why in just a minute. Alan Miller, co-founder at the Together Association, is joining us now. Alan, are you there?
I am here. Hello, Bev, thanks.
Good morning, good morning. Now, listen, tell our audience, because you can articulate this in much better than I can, why I'm giving you this award. This is about vaccine mandates and university students, and you won.
We did indeed. So it's good news, because what had happened was that UCAS, the clearing system, and the 10 universities in Britain were stating that in order for nurses and care workers to actually go onto a course, they had to have the COVID jab. Some were even saying it was a legal requirement. That was utterly not the case. We actually also with GBNews highlighted this, which was very important. We did a campaign which amounted to us writing to the universities and to UCAS and also to MPs and the Department of Education. And subsequently, they have now changed that. We were calling them and asking them to give clarification. It has now gone, which is really good, because we know that we face a huge shortage in care work, at 7.1 million people waiting on the NHS. 160,000 people missing in the care sector, and that's with the 40,000 care workers who were lost due to the vaccine mandate, which, unlike the NHS, where we got it stopped, actually still continue to impact them. So it was really good news, because it means that new, young, fresh minds can now go in and learn and be trained. Obviously, that's a longer-term project, but it was really important, and it really demonstrates what it means when people have their voices heard, when they do get engaged, when they write, when they campaign, when they put pressure on elected representatives. Sometimes we can feel that there's not much we can do, but GB viewers and many of our 300,000 signatories up and down the country all did have their voices heard, and that was a success. So it's really important that we take the successes and we continue to put the public at the heart of matters, to make sure the public gets its voice heard, and we're not just having things done to us, and that we clarify, that we put pressure on, and we insist on privacy, rights, autonomy and freedom together.
Well, Alan, you are the first recipient of the Turner Prize. It is a GB News mug.
Wow.
I know. Calm down in here. I'm sure you are delighted with that, and thank you so much for joining us. It is a triumph. It is also partly, as you say, thanks to GB News, thanks to Nigel Farage's show, actually, that you were on discussing this, and you put pressure on the relevant authorities and you made them change that outdated and ridiculous policy. Alan Miller, you're a legend. Thank you so much. You're also now the recipient of the first Turner Prize. Thank you so much. And the panel are clapping you. Marvellous. Toby Young, let me come to you. He is brilliant, isn't he? And you must be so heartened when you hear actual change being made because of pressure. No, he's a fantastic campaigner. He's done so much to oppose vaccine mandates in particular. And we now know that being vaccinated doesn't stop you infecting other people. So the rationale behind the vaccine mandates has completely collapsed. And the idea that future care workers and nurses would have to be vaccinated before they can even embark on a course, how is that going to help solve the staff shortages in those professions? Absolutely. As teens and young people going into education, they just didn't need that pressure hanging over them. It's superb, isn't it?
A hugely deserving recipient. In a sane universe, he'd be on Boris Johnson's honours list and heading for the House of Lords. You're not kidding. But honestly, send me your suggestions, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.uk to give me your Turner Prizes nominations. Some of you have been getting in touch about the NHS. We were just talking about that earlier, of course. David says, the problem with the NHS will never be resolved because all politicians are afraid to grasp the nettle and reform the service for fear of losing the next election. I worked in the NHS for over 30 years. The last thing it needs is more money. It needs completely reforming. Paul has said about migrants. As a business operator desperate for workers, I've got no objection to immigrants if I could employ them. Large numbers of businesses in the UK are in the same position and are being strangled by a lack of hands on deck. Toby, you weren't here in the first hour when we were talking about this. Big news today with Suella Braverman over there signing this deal. Is it going to make any difference, do you think? It's hard to imagine it's going to make a big impact because all they're going to be doing, as I'm sure the panellists pointed out, is interrupting people's efforts to cross the channel. Yeah. They'll be delaying their crossing, but I don't think they're going to stop it permanently. No. And, you know, if you look at the numbers who came over this year, I mean, it's a big increase on the numbers who came over last year. It's just a kind of metaphor for the impotence of our government, the hopelessness of our politicians and officials, their inability to do something about this problem, which has beset this country for God knows how many years now. And it just seems it's just a kind of constant reminder of our powerlessness in the face of, you know, an enduring problem. Yeah. Nick, I was mentioning at the top of the hour, if you want to watch the whole show today, by the way, you can find it on the GB News app, about the fact that Albania are desperate to join the EU. They want investment. They have some fantastic natural resources, the coastlines, the national parks. They just have, well, they have a corrupt government. Maybe they'd fit in well in the EU. Am I allowed to say that? But actually, maybe that is part of the reason. Maybe Europe should be sweeping them up and helping that country so that 40% of the population will no longer be leaving. 85% at the moment want to leave Albania. What do we do?
It's up to the people in that country to sort the problems out themselves. The West does not have a good record of going into other countries to fix their problems. We tend to make things worse. And what we do in the West is we allow usually young men who should be the backbone of a country, who should be building it and fixing it, we allow them to take the coward's way and run away from their responsibility and set life up somewhere else. And I'm calling them out. It's a cowardly way to go. Yeah. We were asking you, of course, on Twitter what you thought and whether the announcement today of the UK's new £65 million deal with France will fix the influx of illegal immigration. Well, 98% of you say no, it will not help to make any sort of difference. 97.7% there it was. It's not really a surprise, that, Stephen, is it? No, it's just... We've lost faith, completely lost faith.
Well, when I was an MP, I dealt with at least 100 immigration cases a week, every week, week after week after week. And the people who were coming to this country, the immigrants to this country, weren't the women from Afghanistan who were being denied education. They weren't people who were being brutalised and beaten up all over the world. They were the articulate, intelligent young men who used to say, I paid an agent. They always used to say, I said, how did you get here? I paid an agent. Now, look, at the present system, you can actually come from Durrës or you can come from Tirana, rock up in Dover, disappear into the black economy, keep your head down for 5 years and get British citizenship. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if we only had ID cards fingerprinted as soon as you come into the country, A, we'd know who's in the country, and B, we can actually identify those people. And if they are working illegally or they're just trying to disappear into the black economy, we can find them. But the real problem we have here is the percentage of crimes committed, particularly in London, by Albanian gangs. And I'm quoting the Metropolitan Police. This is not a personal prejudice about this. We have a huge problem. We ignore it at our peril. And the idea of having Inspector Clouseau in Dover helping us out there is for the birds. That's absolutely
Is that the solution, Toby? Identification?
I'm not that keen on
Me neither.
ID cards. I'm worried about the emergence of a Chinese-style social credit system in this country, which is we're already beginning to see, and I think that would just accelerate it.
Because it's not a card anymore, Stephen, of course. You don't carry your ID card around in your pocket. It's your digital ID, and it's tied to the government and to big business
and an implant in your brain.
Well, no, but it won't be a card, will it? It will be on your phone. It will be your individual identification number.
I think maybe one of us should say that, Suella Braverman, OK, this may not make a huge difference, but it is something. She is making some headway.
Trying.
And we were told a couple of weeks ago that she was a toxic figure. Rishi Sunak needed to get rid of her. She'd made these supposedly inappropriate remarks comparing the small boats coming over to an invasion. And, to a certain extent, she's proved her critics wrong. She has actually got something done, albeit not something that's going to solve the problem overnight, but it will make perhaps a little difference.
Well, let's see. We've got the rest of the week to talk about it. It's only Monday. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, Toby, Nick and Stephen Pound. I'll be back tomorrow for more Bev Turner. If you want to see today, you can watch it on the app. But GB News Day is next with Mark Longhurst. I'll be back tomorrow. See you then.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's been a misty, murky start for many, but the fog now clearing and leaving a lot of cloud behind with some rain. A weak weather front is crossing the country from the west. That's brought some splashes of rain to western areas, the southwest of England, Wales, Western Scotland, Northern Ireland earlier in the day. It is edging its way eastwards, not bringing a great deal of wet weather, but it will continue to bring some light to moderate outbreaks of rain to western and then eventually central Scotland into parts of mid-Wales and then moving into parts of central southern England. Ahead of that, we've still got a lot of cloud, still got some low cloud covering some higher parts, so fairly gloomy out there. Not as mild as it has been, but still temperatures above average, 15 Celsius in London. Fresher air coming into Northern Ireland, 12 to 13 here, with some sunshine later in the day. And that clear slot transfers east overnight, but rain and strong winds return to Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest. And this area of rain is heavier, it's more intense. There'll be some lively weather coming through overnight across western parts of the UK, that's for sure. But with all of that weather coming in from the west, it's going to be a mild night and an unsettled start to Tuesday for most. We've got this heavy and persistent rain. We've got this strong wind coming up from the south as well. The rain clears the west again, returning to sunshine for Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and the southwest for a time, but further showers and some longer spells of rain arrive here, whilst the more persistent wet weather ends up across eastern Scotland and northern England by the afternoon. A cooler day, 11 to 14 for most. And it's going to turn increasingly windy. The wind coming in from the southwest will be particularly strong around parts of Wales and the southwest of England later on Tuesday, bringing a lot of showers in from the southwest as well, whilst the more persistent rain edges to the northeast of Scotland. The weather stays highly changeable for the second half of this week. Heavy rain, longer spells of wet weather.